Here's what's coming up on episode 115 of the Big Seance podcast. Mitchell Coombes.
There's an old saying that my nana used to say, and that is, many curious things I see while telling fortunes in your tea. And I learnt to read the tea leaves from her when I was 6. You know, really, I joke and I say, just like the little boy in the movie The Sixth Sense, I really do see dead people, except as a child, I called them green people because they would appear as, well, you see, they would appear as these green human-like forms at the end of my bed. And I'm not going to lie, at first the sight of them petrified me. I mean, I was terrified. I explained to my audiences before each, audience event that we are energy, our loved ones are energy, and we need to raise our energy and raise the energy in the room to call the spirit world in. So I invite my audience to stand, to stamp their feet, to clap their hands, to get excited, and to really just focus on a loved one in the spirit world. And it's as simple as that. And, you can feel the electricity in the air. You can feel the energy in the air. But what I do is I focus on all the places that I've been that day, and I call my energy back. Nobody else's energy, just my energy. Because we leave fragments of our aura, we leave parts of our energy wherever we've been.
Shut up. That is fascinating.
Welcome to the Big Seance podcast. I'm Patrick Keller of BigSeance.com, and this is a place for an open discussion on all things paranormal, but specifically topics like ghosts and hauntings, paranormal research, spirit communication, psychics and mediums, and life after death. So basically, anything that pops up in my paranormal world. The candles are already lit, so you might as well come on in and join the seance.
Well, today I am super excited for you to hear my chat in the parlor with Australia's most trusted spiritual medium, Mitchell Coombes. Mitchell tells me he listens to the show, and he said he missed the way that I did the little sneak peeks for a long time and, set it to music like you just heard. And it made me smile because I always loved them too. But I told him I had received mixed feedback about the sneak peeks before the show, and I haven't really mentioned this on the podcast too much. If you're in the Big Seance parlor, you might have participated in a poll I posted, actually. Some people liked the sneak peeks, some people didn't. Some people loved the music, some people didn't. But even I realized that at one point, they were getting a little too long. So a while back, you may have noticed I've tried to meet people in the middle, and I've since slimmed down the sneak peeks considerably and taken out the music. Well, since Mitchell misses them, and since I miss them, I figured I'd bring the old way back this week just for him. So that's what you just heard. Do you have any opinions about the sneak peeks at the beginning of the show? Let me know. Patrick at BigSeance.com. I'd love to hear from you. Well, I loved this conversation with Mitchell so much. Our Australian listeners love him. And if you're just learning about him, I think you're going to love him too. He has such a beautiful energy, and he even offered me a reading when my late grandfather showed up with some messages. This was so very cool because earlier that day, I actually said a little prayer to 2 of my loved ones in spirit and requested that they be present for my interview. My grandfather was one of them. I intended on including a portion of that reading in this episode, but after editing out some personal and family details, I realized that the exciting moments with validation went with those edits. So I decided to keep the reading private. But I want you to know that I do believe my grandfather came through. Mitchell passed on accurate personality traits and was spot on about my relationship with him. And he knew details about the day he passed with me being present. I was able to pass on some validating messages to other members of my immediate family as well. I never expect or request readings when I interview my guests, and I rarely receive them. But I want to thank Mitchell for being willing to communicate what was coming through. And I want to thank my grandfather as well. Well, enough blabbing. Let's pour the tea and get to the interview. Mitchell Coombes is Australia's most trusted spiritual medium. His best-selling books, Sensing Spirit and Sensing Psychic, have transformed lives and brought comfort to thousands, as well as his television appearances on Channel 7's The Morning Show. Mitchell writes a weekly column for Woman's Day magazine and is a regular guest on numerous radio shows, including Breakfast with Tanya Wilkes and Steve G on Newcastle's 102.9 KOFM. Born and raised in Newcastle, New South Wales, Mitchell comes from a long line of gifted psychics that stretches back more than 400 years. Calling on his remarkable gift to communicate with the spirit world, Mitchell has helped people from all walks of life around the globe. To learn more about his work and schedule, visit mitchellcoombes.com, and that's MITCHELL, and Coombes is COOMBES.com. It is an honor to finally have you join me here in the parlor, Mitchell.
It's such a pleasure, Patrick, and thank you. What a wonderful introduction.
Oh, I have been looking forward to this for a long time. You know, we had our mutual Paranerd friend, Susan, get us connected, and I've been reading your 2 books. One of them I have left to read, but I've read Sensing Spirit, a fabulous book. It's great to hear about this wonderful, fabulous psychic medium from Australia, where I am not from, and where it is warm and beautiful right now.
It is warm and beautiful. And look, thank you. And I'm just very excited to share with you, my experiences and to chat about all things paranormal. It's exciting.
And I know you have a drink with you.
I do. What I'm drinking is a loose leaf tea in a wide brimmed cup. And then perhaps I might even read your tea leaves if you'll have one too.
Oh my gosh. I was just going to ask you if you were going to plan on reading the tea leaves later.
Well, there we are.
Well, my tea is actually coffee. And so, I don't know, maybe we'll be lucky enough to have something lingering at the bottom. I'm not sure.
If there's coffee grounds, maybe.
Maybe 1 or 2. I usually don't have that many.
There's an old saying that my nana used to say, and that is, many curious things I see while telling fortunes in your tea. And I learned to read the tea leaves from her when I was 6. So there you are.
And do you ever, practice it anymore? Do you still practice every now and then, tea leaves?
Oh, yes. From time to time, I'll pour myself a cup of tea and I'll think, I just wonder what images, what symbols will appear in my cup. What does the universe want me to know at this time? And it's fabulous, and it's such an easy way of learning to tune into your own life, is learning to, decode, if you will, the symbols in your own teacup.
Like a little brain teaser.
Exactly.
So we have quite a few Australian friends and listeners who I'd like to give a shout out to. And I know it won't be everyone, but I'm thinking of paranerds like Diana and once again Susan, who connected me with Mitchell. And we have Sonia and Doran, and I'm sure there are others as well. So Australia represent. Woo!
Woohoo!
So I want to fairly quickly jump into your mediumship work, but I just have to ask, due to my own ignorance, basically, does spiritualism or psychic mediumship in Australia differ much from the United States?
What I would say is that it differs everywhere you go in the world. Everyone has different views and understandings and ideals and ideas about how spiritualism and mediumship and spirit communication works. But what I have found is there is always a common denominator. And as a medium, that common denominator is to provide as much evidential detail as you can that offers proof of survival, that love, like life, can never die, that the soul is eternal. And through giving validation, through giving evidential details, it helps the person that you're giving a message to or connecting the spirit world with, can really take away such an assurance within themselves that they really are receiving a contact from their loved one in the spirit world, and that there is proof that there is life after death. So I consider myself really employed by the spirit world, and I consider myself to be a representative or a voice, if you will, for the spirit world. And so my main focus and goal, of course, is to offer proof to their loved ones, that they're still a part of their lives and that they're still a part of their world and that life does go on. There, in my philosophy and worldview, there is no such thing as death. It's an impossibility. There is no death. It really is an illusion.
When I talk to our friends from the UK about mediumship, they've often said that things tend to be more skeptic there. They tend to have more, professional skeptics compared to the US. How skeptic, in general, do you think Australia tends to be?
No, I think it's no different than anywhere else in the world. And I would say that, there are going to be skeptics in every part of the world. And I would say that everybody is entitled to their opinion as well. To me, because of the work that I do, of course, I've come across people who are skeptical, but I've also come across people who just aren't educated in the areas of understanding that there is more to the universe than perhaps what we can see, hear, feel, and touch. And it's quite interesting. A lot of people I have found in my path that might term themselves a skeptic are actually not really a true skeptic. They consider themselves to be skeptical, but once they've had an experience and they've had a direct personal experience, their worldview seems to change, and it's as though a door is cracked wide open for those people. But everyone's entitled to their, their view and their belief and their thoughts on things. What I often feel and think, though, is that, skeptics insisted that the world was flat, and I just don't know how they really went with that. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, and one thing that I've often felt and thought and have said, and that is that for those who believe, no proof is actually necessary. And for those who don't believe, no proof will ever be enough, or proof will never be enough. And so therefore, it's never really truly possible. There's a difference between a cynic and a skeptic. And a cynic, of course, is someone who's never going to believe. I mean, it wouldn't matter if you could walk on water. They're not going to believe. And that's why I say that what I do is not about, people believing or not believing. It's actually about honoring those in the spirit world and honoring our loved ones that have passed over and the world of spirit and remembering them as well. So I consider that to be very important.
I think for some people, they just have to have their experience. Just they haven't had it yet, and we're just waiting for them to have it. So be patient.
and it's good to question, isn't it? I mean, it's fabulous to question. It's great to have an element of, well, that's nice, but is it really? It's great to question, but there comes a point where once you've received your own evidence, you need to make a choice here and go, well, I have enough now that says to me, no, this is, there is something to this. And I mean, I had a gentleman once who had come to see me for an appointment many years ago, and his secretary had scheduled the appointment. He said he wanted to go to speak to a medium, and he didn't care who. He just wanted someone that she could refer. And this lady had a session with me. And so she contacted my office and said, look, my boss really wants a session. And he's a multimillionaire. He was a high-powered man in his chosen career. And it was the afternoon, and I remember that I welcomed him into my reading room where I conduct my sessions, and he sat down opposite me and he took one look at me and he said, I don't know what I was expecting, but you're not it. And I thought, oh, gee, that doesn't sound too great, but what he was expecting, of course, was the traditional medium that, or the cliche, if you will, the crystal ball and the hooped earrings and the bandana, possibly even the dark room with the, is there anyone there? And, here I am, this young guy, and he's looking at me and he's thinking to himself, wow, so I think too, people are becoming more accepting and far more open. You'll find that these days people, back when I first begun this work, it was everyone would say it in hushed voices. I'm going to speak to a psychic. I'm going to speak to a medium. Shh, don't tell anyone. It's all secret. Nowadays, people blast it. over to all their friends. They tell people, I'm going to see so-and-so, and people are so excited. And I think it's wonderful. We're in a period now where I'm finding that mediumship and the concepts of psychic and awareness and spirituality, it's second nature for a lot of people, as it perhaps should be.
We're not in the dark anymore.
The face of mediumship has stepped into the light, and it's fantastic. And I'm very excited about what the future is going to bring for this whole field of work. My work is so important to me because it really is bringing comfort and healing to many. And I love that aspect to my work. But sometimes I even myself underestimate the significance of how transformative it can be for some people. And it was really brought home to me. I had an experience a few years ago, and it really brought home to me how important the work is of a medium. And I was in my local audio hi-fi type store, and I was looking to buy an iPod jack for my iPod for my car. Very mundane. I'm going in there at close to 5 p.m. It's almost closing time. And as I'm standing in the aisle, there is another lady standing in the aisle who, is looking at some of the things there. And all of a sudden, I feel a force. I can't explain it to you any other way than a force literally catapulted, pushed me into this lady. I practically bowled her over. And I said to her, when I helped her back up to her feet, I'm so terribly sorry. I didn't mean to walk into you just now. I mean, it was like a force had pushed me into her. I said, but I believe that there's a reason why this has happened. And this lady looked at me as if to say, how so? And I explained who I was and what I did. I said, and I'm a medium and I talk to the spirit world, and I believe I have a message to pass on, and would it be okay if I shared that with you? I always seek permission before I launch into delivering a message, because as you should. Mm-hmm. And she said, okay. And I said, to tell you the truth, the reason why I've bumped into you just now is because there is a little girl in the spirit world who is standing to your left. She tells me that she is your daughter. She's about 6 years old. And she tells me it was not your fault. And this lady burst into tears. And I said, and she also tells me that it's not your time to go, you're needed here. And this lady was just, beside herself, and you could hear the deep sobs, and she was processing, you could tell, a lot of grief. And when she could regain her own composure, she said, thank you. You don't realize what you've just done. I come to learn that her daughter was outside playing with her friend in the front yard of their home, and they were playing with a ball, and they were kicking a ball around and whatever. And the ball had gone out onto the road. And in that moment, the mother, prior to that happening, actually the phone had rung. And as she ducked inside or went inside to answer the phone, the ball went out onto the road, and this lady's daughter was struck by an oncoming car, and she was killed instantly. And this mother felt so responsible for her daughter's passing, to the point that she felt she couldn't go on anymore, that she had decided that that particular night she was going to end her life. And the fact that I'd bumped into her and delivered that message to her changed everything, and it put her onto a path of healing. And she thanked me profusely, but I thanked my guides profusely for putting me in the right place at the right time to help somebody that perhaps was in a very, very dark situation or a very upsetting situation. So, the work of a medium is always happening. And even though I say I turn myself off or I turn the volume down, I don't go down the street without being aware of the spirit world. And there are many times that I will sense and feel the spirit world say, can you just give a message, or can you help me with this, or could you pass on some reassurance about that? And I've had to learn to actually hold back and say, well, if you'd like me to do that, you'll need to create an opportunity for that conversation to happen. But, there I am going in to buy an iPod jack, an iPod cable, and here I am giving a message to a lady who was planning to take her own life after what had happened with her daughter. And here I am, feeling a force push me into this stranger. And, it started the conversation.
And after moments like that, do you walk out wanting to do a cartwheel, just kind of feeling satisfaction of helping someone?
No, when I felt that, there's wonderful gratification, but when I was absolutely certain that she would be okay, that she was okay, that she was all right, and I followed certain channels where I followed up things with her and different things like that, I felt satisfied she was okay to be left, back to her own vices, if you will. But no, I don't do the work I do for satisfaction. I'm not a person that, and I don't even like, to be honest with you, I didn't tell people about that experience for a very long time. I mean, those kinds of experiences happen to me often, where I've in some way helped a person in an unusual way. Or I was on a cruise ship recently, and there was a lady in the swimming pool, and we were just bathing and swimming in the swimming pool, having a great time. And all of a sudden I felt the tap on my shoulder, and I knew that her husband was there. wishing her a happy anniversary, and it was indeed her anniversary. So there are moments that just bring so much beauty into my life where I look back and I feel, wow, isn't that such a beautiful, touching moment? So it brings me joy, but I certainly didn't do a cartwheel. Because it wasn't me that did anything. This is the thing. Yeah. I'm just the messenger. I'm just the vehicle. Information flows from the spirit world through me as the medium and to those here. I'm just an instrument.
So you must have had a lot of these experiences, because we know from your book that you made your first prediction at the age of 3, and you learned to read tea leaves at 6, as we've already talked about. And so you've been doing this for a long time. Can you describe to us, because everybody works differently and people talk about their clairs, how does specifically mediumship work for you?
Well, I see, I hear, and I feel, and I sense. So I have, of course, all those clairs where I see, which is clairvoyance, I hear, which is clairaudience, and I feel, which is clairsentience. And I have those senses. I also have taste as well at certain times that will come into play when I'm delivering a message from the spirit world. And from the time I can remember, Patrick, I've always seen faces and heard voices. So sometimes I will see the spirit world as clearly as I will see a person that I might be sitting opposite across from. And other times it is more, I'm going to say, more abstract, or I see a silhouette, or I have a sense. Other times I will hear them talking to me. There are times that I will hear their voice quite audible in my ear, and I can tell if they're from the north of England, or if they're from America, or if they're from Spain, because I will hear the accent in their voice.
When you experience all of them, does it get more distracting? I mean, I'm sure you're used to it, but yeah. To me, it seems like a lot of stimuli. Sometimes at one time.
Not really. It's a little bit like, when you eat food, if you're fortunate enough to have all of your physical senses, of sight and taste and touch and so on, and smell, you're smelling your food, you're tasting your food, you're seeing your food, it doesn't feel too overwhelming to look at a meal in front of you. And it's much the same with the spirit world. Yes, there's a lot of stimuli, there's a lot of information coming in, but they work in unison together. So you have total awareness. And in fact, one of the best ways for anybody that's wanting to harness their sixth sense, as you call it, or, wants to harness their psychic senses, is to strengthen their physical senses, because total awareness is what actually brings about the sixth sense. It's really true. I was brought up in a family where I was taught that we don't have 5 senses, we have 6, and your sixth sense is the first and the most important sense.
And that's because it had come through the family for such a long time.
Exactly. My mother, my nana, her mother, so my great-grandmother, my great-great-grandmother, my uncle was a tarot reader and astrologer. And so I'm a 5th generation clairvoyant and medium. And I'm very fortunate to have come from, you could say, a psychic family in that way. Really, we have a history of the tarot and tea leaves and astrology. And I'm so blessed. But, my abilities were never encouraged, and they were never discouraged either. I was just left to become who I am, which I think is such a wonderful, wonderful gift in itself.
Yeah.
But, when I was 3 is when I first begun recalling seeing the spirit world, was from the age of 3. And, really, I joke and I say, just like the little boy in the movie, The Sixth Sense, I really do see dead people, except as a child, I called them green people because they would appear as these green human-like forms at the end of my bed. And I'm not going to lie, at first the sight of them petrified me. I was terrified, and I would have night terrors and run to my parents and say, the green people are back. And it was my mother who said, well, tell me more about them. Do they hurt you? I said, no. And she said, well, if you listen, they may actually have a special message to share with you. And my little ears at 3 and 3.5 pricked up at that time. They perked up, and I began to listen. And it was as I become older, as I grew older, I discovered that they weren't green people at all. They were the spirits. They were the souls of people's loved ones that were coming to visit with messages. And one of my earliest memories of the spirit world visiting is my mother had a friend coming over to visit, and they were having coffee or tea and having a catch up. And I was maybe 4.5. I was quite young. And I remember as they were having their tea, I could see a lady in the spirit world standing next to the lady that was visiting my mum, to my mother's friend. And I could see this woman, and she put her finger to her lips and went, shh. And then she rocked her arms like she was holding a baby. And I went up to my mother's friend and right up to her, and I looked at her stomach and I said, there's a baby growing inside you. There's a baby living inside there in your tummy. And she laughed and she was quite dismissive. And she said, oh, no, that's an interesting imagination, oh, wow, type thing. And anyway, their meeting came and went, and might have been maybe 3 weeks or even 4. It was close to a month that had come to pass. And the phone had rung, and on the end of the phone was my mother's friend, the one who had come to visit. And she said to my mother, how did he know? We weren't trying for a child. We were told we couldn't have children. We certainly weren't expecting a child. And it turns out that I'm currently 2 weeks pregnant. And Mum said to me when she got off the phone, what made you say that? I mean, knowing full well what made me say it, but of course she wanted to get my answer. What made you say it? I said, the lady told me, and I was, of course, referring to the lady's mother in the spirit world who had passed over years before.
So did she confirm, yep, we've passed it down?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And that's like, I inherited my uncle's set of tarot cards when I was 12, and I began learning to read tarot when I was 12 years old. And it was actually through learning to read the symbols of the tea leaves when I was 6 with my nan that really helped to open my ideas, if you will, and my eyes to the concept of symbols and signs, which as a medium now in my later years is fantastic because the spirit will often communicate in symbols. And I've got such a vast library, it really helps me to understand the message that's being conveyed when I'm being communicated to in a visual manner.
Mm-hmm. And you had a near-death experience at 13. How does an incredible event like that affect your abilities? And do you think it was, you write about something called a soul print in your book. Do you think that was in your soul print?
Most definitely. So a soul print, very much like what you'd call a blueprint of the soul. Same thing. You have a blueprint of the soul, or you have your soul's map, if you will. And I do feel that there are a number of things that we map out for ourselves as souls to come here to Earth to learn about, to grow from. And I can tell you, it's funny because looking back, I now realize that was the very first meeting of my spirit guide, Red Feather. I have a Native American spirit guide. I asked the same question, like I'm sure a lot of people ask when you discover you have a Native American guide. Why is it that guides always seem to be Native American? But he's a Native American guide. And I heard his voice at the age of 13, but didn't quite realize until many years later, really, that was my guide talking to me. And so going back to your question about my near-death experience, I happened to live near the beach growing up. And a friend of mine, we were 13 years old at the time, went down to the beach, and really large waves and tides from the night before had actually washed out large sections of the sand or of the beach. And so it left really big sand drops, if you will, or what you call like dunes, but they were really big drops of sand.
Mm-hmm.
And my friend and I were daring each other to see how brave we could be to walk along the edge of this sand without managing to make the sand break. And I mean, there was about a 2 or 3 meter drop. So there were quite high croppings of sand that had been cut out from the water. And as we were walking along, I turned back to my friend as if to say, I've won, look, I can do this. And all of a sudden, the sand where I was standing under me fell from under my feet. I fell quite a fair height, was winded, and then more sand had fallen down on top of me. And there was a period there where I was buried alive, basically, under the sand. It was quite heavy. It wasn't deep enough that you couldn't dig me out, but it was enough that I couldn't lift my body up. And I couldn't breathe. And so I started to feel my breathing slowing. I started to feel myself going lightheaded. And then all of a sudden, I remember I saw myself and felt myself lift up and out of my body. I looked out to the horizon. I could see the horizon. I could see the water. I could see my friend Kieran, who was furiously digging around below, trying to dig me out of the sand. And thank goodness he had the intelligence at 13 to do that. Most 13-year-olds wouldn't think that way.
Yeah.
And so I was really lucky. And as my breathing fully stopped, I remember feeling myself lift right up so high. And I remember saying, oh my goodness, what's happening? And there was a man that appeared. And I said to him, what are you doing in my dream? And the voice said, it was a silhouette of a man. He said, you're not dreaming, Mitchell. This is what it feels like to die. And I remember saying, but I don't want to die. I'm only 13. And the voice said, I know, and you and I have important work to do back here on the earth. And of course, that was the experience that I had had. And as my friend had dug all the sand off of me, he then moved closer to me because he could see that I wasn't really properly breathing. And he accidentally kneed me in the side of my ribs, and it made me suck in a huge gulp of air, take a breath, and I heroically lived to tell the tale. And it's the only time I've ever had such a major, experience. Mediums often talk about they've had a near-death experience and it's what propelled them to become a medium and all this. I was already seeing the spirit world long before that, not fully aware of what I was experiencing. So I didn't have any major event, if you will, that you could say catapulted me into something. But it was the only time I've ever had one of those events like that where, you really see things from a very different perspective, because I was seeing outside of my body. I could see him digging below and hearing that voice. And it wasn't until many years later that I was learning to practice the art of meditation. And I heard the same voice that I heard when I was 13 speak into my ear. And it made me sit up straight. I thought, oh my goodness, wait a second. Why am I hearing this same voice again? Like, it made me nervous to begin with. And the voice said to me, I'm your guide. And that was all I had. And then I went about life and was doing meditation and different things. And I must have been, 14, 15, something like that. And practicing meditation. I was really curious about it all, and I come to find red feathers everywhere I would go. I would go for a walk on the beach and I'd find a red feather. I'd go collect the mail out of the letterbox and there'd be a red feather. I'd go to put on my school shoes and there would be a red feather. And over a period of maybe it was about 8 months, possibly even a year, I come to find in particular 4 very striking red feathers. They were quite significant. And as you can imagine, red feathers aren't, especially with Australian wildlife, are not necessarily a common thing. We have magpies, which have black feathers. We have, crows, which have black feathers. We have birds with white feathers. But red feathers are quite peculiar to find in the first place. But I collected them and I held on to these 4 red feathers and I would sit with them in meditation and I would ponder the significance of what they meant. We often hear that when you find a feather, it's a sign from the spirit world or it's a message that maybe your angel's with you and so on and so forth. And as I was holding these feathers in one of the meditations I was doing, I heard the same voice again come back and he said, my name is Red Feather and I am your guide. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, that's interesting,
Hey, what's up?
What do you look like? I'm trying to, because I'm not seeing anything. I'm just hearing at this point, what do you look like? And he said to me, I'm going to show myself to you. You will soon see a vision of me. So like a smart teenager, I thought to myself, oh my goodness me, my guide's going to appear in the meditation. And that didn't happen. And I got very upset and I thought, oh, maybe he means a dream, so maybe he'll appear to me in a dream. So every night I do this little ritual where I would write a question and say to my guide, please come to me in my dream and so on and so forth. And of course I would wake each morning very disappointed. The dream never happened. I had other lovely dreams, but not a dream of my guide. I happened to be invited with a friend to go down to a spiritual festival, a psychic type fair, just as as a person that's just, I wasn't working professionally at that time. And as we were going around the fair, we're looking at crystals and books and, different things and having a great time. A lady, somebody whom I've never met before, an older lady, lovely lady, came up and tapped me on the shoulder. She said, excuse me, I need to talk to you. I mean, my heart just skipped a bit. I thought, what have I done wrong? Have I looked at someone the wrong way? I was, concerned. I was scared. And she said, I don't normally do this, but I've been told that this, and she's holding an envelope in her hands, this is for you. You need this. This belongs to you. So she hands me this envelope and I'm about to open this envelope. And before I open it, she grabs my hand and she says, but before you open it, I must tell you, I've been told to tell you, the number 4 is very important. And so too is the symbol of red feathers. And I mean, my eyes widened in disbelief. I was like, have you been watching me through my bedroom? Who are you? How do you know these things? And so I open up the envelope and as I pull out a piece of art-like card, her skill and her talent and her gift as a spiritual guide artist was very evident. And there, staring me back in my face, drawn in beautiful pastels, is a Native American guide with 4 red feathers in his headdress. And I smiled and said to myself, red feather, so that's what you look like. And that's how I had come to meet my guide. And my spirit guide is one of my greatest mentors. He is my mentor. He is my teacher. He's there with me all the time. When I need him, he's there. When I do this work, he's there. There are times that I'll be giving a message to somebody And if I'm not sure of the message or how to deliver the message, if it's a delicate message, I will often feel him squeeze my shoulder. I will feel him say, it's okay, you can say this. So, and it's just wonderful. And the best way to get to know your guide is, and in my experience, I learned this the hard way, is not to strain, is not to push for it, is not to try too hard, but to accept the fact that we do often have a guide and we do often have spiritual help from outside sources. And all we need to do is begin to talk to them and accept that they're there. And like any good friendship, over time, more details come to light. You get to learn more about who they are, where they're from, what they look like, perhaps what their name is. And you build a relationship just as you would with someone that you're meeting here on the earth as a friend. You take things slowly. And so that's how I come to meet my guide. And he's been with me ever since.
So you must have heard our friend Claire Broad talk about how she came upon an artist representation of her Native American guide as well. I think that I'm sitting here listening to you, and I remember that from the book now, but she had the same similar thing. And so now she knows what her Native American guide looked like, which is kind of cool. But you said he had 4 feathers, and that represents the 4 feathers that you had already collected, right?
Correct. And in the picture, there were 4 red feathers in the headdress that this artist had drawn.
Wow.
And of course, my spirit guide's name, I neglected to tell you his name, is Red Feather. So, it's just one of those things. And whenever I find feathers, I know that one of my guides is with me. But I also have a guide who likes to make me laugh. I have a guide that I call my joy guide. I have a guide that if I'm taking life too seriously, or if I'm really stressed about something, or if I'm anxious about something, or if I'm whatever, or if I need cheering up, I find small buttons on the ground. And it's one of these strange things where everywhere I go, it doesn't matter where I go, I often will find like just buttons, like from coats and shirts and in all kinds of places, mind you. And so I have a guide that I've affectionately called Buttons, who turns out was actually working as a clown in his lifetime. So, I have a very comical guide as well, which is wonderful. But Red Feather is the one that really, he teaches me quite a lot. And I can't tell you, he will always know more than I know. And I'm forever asking questions of Red Feather, of the universe and of nature and of life and of death and of people. And, and he's wonderful. I don't know what I'd do without him, to be honest, because he really is a wonderful inspirer in my life. That's
cool.
I'm never alone, Patrick, never alone. Because, the thing is, people say, don't you get lonely? And I'm not really ever alone because I always have people in the spirit world. And in fact, I count those in the spirit world, some of them amongst my closest friends, confidants, and companions.
So you do a lot of live gallery style readings. And for listeners here in the US, if you think about the John Edwards and James Van Praagh, that kind of thing. And so that's kind of your thing too. And so how do you deal with the pressure of doing so many, gallery style readings like that? That's a lot of pressure.
It is a lot of pressure, but the pressure I feel is often walking out on stage and saying to the spirit world, okay, it's time to come through now. Because you're always, of course, walking out with, unlike other people that work in those kinds of areas, you have actors, you have singers, you have, musicians, they have a plan.
Mm-hmm.
I never have a plan. I walk out and I'm waiting for the spirit world to direct me to who I'm going to talk to in the audience, where I'm going to go, what connections are going to come through. And I never have any control over that. And of course, I surrender and let the spirit world guide me with all of that. So the pressure I often feel is the nerves of waiting for the spirit world to come through. But of course, the moment I walk out, I sense the spirit world there with me, and and I begin. And I find it can be very hard work sometimes to convey a very heartfelt and very important message in a short space of time. And I always know that my audience have come, they're expecting something special from me. They're wanting a connection. They've come for their own reasons of wanting, comfort or healing or reassurance or validation. But my greater audience, those in the spirit world, I have to be careful not to disappoint them, to make sure that I do them proud and I do the right work, that I express and I pass on their words of encouragement and healing and their messages of love in a way that accurately depicts exactly what they wish to convey. And, I always say that my events aren't about sensationalism, but quite often sensational things happen, and actually, in recent times, I must tell you, Patrick, we have had some would you call it? Well, we've had electrical disturbance and activities happen during my events. And one such event happened last year in October. And I was doing an event with an auditorium of about 900 people. And as I'd come out onto the stage, the microphone, which had brand new batteries in the microphone pack, drained the energy in the room. And it definitely was the spirit world. Drained the battery pack, and of course the microphone cut out. So then I had a stagehand, they run me another microphone. The moment I held it, drained. No battery life. The batteries were dead, had died again. So then they got me another microphone, drained. Then they're scrambling around in the office trying to find more packets of brand new high quality batteries to put in, which they had done. And the mics for the whole night just kept playing up, cutting in and cutting out. And in the end, I ended up screaming with 900 people in the auditorium as loud as I could, just so
grab a megaphone or something like that.
It was a bit like that. And then another occurrence happened when I was doing an event in a country town called Tamworth. And some of your American listeners that are into country music might know that Tamworth is the largest. It's our country music capital in Australia. So they have a big country music festival each year, and big, very famous country musicians, go there. I was in the auditorium there, and as I would walk to one side of the stage to address one side of the room, there were some mood lights that were on the wall that couldn't be turned off, and they can't be dimmed. They're either all on or they're all off. Mm-hmm. And so it was just creating a little bit of ambient lighting down the sides of the room. And the lights, as I was talking to somebody about their loved one in the spirit world, right near there, the lights started to flicker. And of course, the room started to jitter. But where they really jittered was when I'd walked to the other side of the stage, and the lights that were on the other side of the room, who had stayed consistent and normal, would then start to flicker. And so wherever I would move, whichever focus of the room I was on, the lights, and that's happened now on 3 occasions. It happened at an event in Sydney, actually 2 events in Sydney, one in Tamworth, and then the battery thing that happened last year. So, and I just say, look, the spirit world, because the spirit world will use energy. The spirit world is energy. Our loved ones, we are a form of energy. And this is why often we'll have a light or a lamp at home that might sometimes occasionally flicker when a loved one is coming to visit, it's interesting how they often will work through electrical things to get our attention. And but it's happened during my events. That often happens. So I'm no stranger to having these little mishaps and hiccups happening now during my events. And I just realized it's the spirit world building up their energy to manifest in a more powerful way.
I believe it. Actually, in a video, I remember seeing you drumming up energy in front of your audience. And it's something that I haven't seen before. Do you want to explain that?
Yes. I am a person that I find that the spirit world responds to our excitement. The spirit world responds to our laughter, responds to our happiness. And I explain to my audiences before each, audience event that we are energy, our loved ones are energy, and we need to raise our energy and raise the energy in the room to call the spirit world in. So I invite my audience to stand, to stamp their feet, to clap their hands, to get excited, and to really just focus on a loved one in the spirit world. And it's as simple as that. And, you can feel the electricity in the air. You can feel the energy in the air, and that's what I always say. The spirit world responds to our excitement. The spirit world responds to our laughter. And the more happier we are, the more they're enjoying things with us as well. That's why I say to my audiences, I'm touching on very real and very raw emotions when I do this work. And I never would ever want to belittle or disrespect anyone's memory of their loved one. But there are times that I do like to bring humor into my events, because humor is one of our greatest healers. Laughter is a great form of healing. And so getting the audience to participate in that way, and it creates energy in the room, it does. And it's just something I've always done. It's something that I felt inspired to do. I remember my guide in the spirit world there was early on said to me once, right, what you need to do is have the audience stand up. You need them to do this, and it will change the energy in the room. And I said, all right then. So I had done what I was guided to do. And of course, the energy in the room did change, and I've just adopted it into my practices. I guess you could call it a ritual. It's something I just like to do, and my audiences have come to expect that because we're always creating energy, and I've had great experiences with it. We've had great events.
It's like what they've always said with the Skull Group from England. They always encouraged lighthearted singing and laughing and things like that to raise the energy.
Well, it's so true, isn't it? There's an old saying, laugh and the world will laugh with you. Cry and you will weep alone. And it's so true. Laughter is such an important part of our our psyche, enjoyment. And yes, there are things that we can be very sad about, and all grief is horrible. And it is sad when we lose a loved one here. But, our loved ones actually we miss our loved ones more than they miss us. And the reason why I say that is because our loved ones truly have never really left us. They're in the spirit world, but they often touch back in, and they're often there, reassuring us during difficult times, or comforting us, or saying hello, or giving us a smile, or visiting us on our birthday, or for Christmas, or for Easter, or perhaps a celebration of some kind that we celebrate in our family or in our cultural traditions. We miss them more than they miss us, and we are their version of heaven. And it's so true. And I've seen that time and time and time again.
From what you know and your experiences and how you communicate, what is life like when we cross over?
We continue. It's very similar to how we have our topography here. I find the spirit world has a very similar topography. In fact, I often feel that their world is superimposed almost over the top of this physical world. And I remember my guide once saying to me, in your reality, that chair that you're sitting in, Mitchell, is reality. It's tangible. You call that reality. In our world, it's unreality. And in our world, the chair is reality. And when you come to our world, the chair you'll sit on there is reality. And the chair that you've been sitting on in the other world, in your world, won't be reality anymore. It really is just like stepping into the next room. I know it's like a riddle, isn't it? It's getting your head around it.
It's like world of the opposites.
It really is. It's world of the opposites. And because we always, we say that what we can perceive, what we can see, what we are aware of is reality. But the thing is, the spectrum of, the spectrum of sound, of color, of vibration, of frequency is so large and so huge. And we only perceive one small fraction on even the visible light spectrum, as an example. So, what we perceive as reality. So we think that the chair we're sitting in is reality. We think the table that we might, have our arms rested on is reality. But in the spirit world, that will become your reality, because the spirit world then becomes your new reality. And it's very similar to this world. And we have different lessons and learning and experiences on the other side. It is, I've only been shown glimpses through my communications with the spirit world of the other side. So I don't have the full picture, but I have enough to know it is quite similar to our world. I don't find it to be very different at all. Although I did have one really sweet young boy say to me once, "Can you ask my dad? I've been leaving biscuits out for him. Can you ask him if he's enjoying the biscuits in the spirit world?" And his father smiled and said, "Tell him I can only eat the love that he sends, because biscuits fall straight through to my feet." But, the spirit world is very similar to this world, and it's a beautiful place. I mean, I've seen nurseries in the spirit world where children that perhaps for whatever reason pass very young, or souls that don't quite make it down here to the earth, a child that might be perhaps born sleeping. I've seen that there's capsules, and they're all brightly colored over there in the spirit world, and they're nursed back with TLC, with tender loving care. And one of my favorite things to talk about, I mean, I know you've asked me about to describe the spirit world, but we want to be aware of the spirit world. But the interesting thing is most of us aren't really aware of the world that we're living in. And I think to become aware of the spirit world, you need to be more aware of the world that you're in here. We need to have more awareness here. And especially an awareness of recognizing when the spirit world is touching us in our lives. The spirit world and spirits and souls are just like the wind. We don't see the wind, but we see the force of the wind. We feel the force of the wind, and we certainly see what the wind touches. We see the leaves blowing in the trees. We see the tall blades of grass drifting as the wind touches the grass. We see that. Well, as the spirit world touches you in your life, how aware and how at home are you that they're there in your life? And I say to people, a big thing that, and I talk about this a lot in my books, especially in Sensing Spirit, is learning to recognize and identify signs from the spirit world, Patrick. What are the signs that your loved ones are sending you? What are the signs when you're feeling the presence of the spirit world around you? And the interesting thing is people just go, "Oh, yeah, it's a sign." That's great. But recognize that it's not just a sign. It's actually a manifestation of energy from the spirit world. It is a manifestation in our physical world that's a representation of their love and of their energy. And you ask about what the spirit world is like. Well, in one of my books, I share a little parable, a little story here, if you will. And it's about a man that passes over, goes to the spirit world, and he meets his guardian angel. And his guardian angel says, "I'm going to give you a tour of the afterlife." And so they walk down a very long corridor, and they come to a huge room. And in that room, he sees thousands and thousands of angels, and they're very, very, very busy working, doing things. And he turns to his guide and says, tell me, what is this place? He said, well, this is the department where all the requests for prayers for healing are received from the earth. This is where everyone that asks for help, asks for a sign, asks for comfort, this is where the requests are received. He said, oh my God, it's very busy in there. My goodness, it's very busy in there. Yeah, we could always do with an extra pair of hands in there. They keep walking down the long corridor. They come to a second room now. It's twice as big, twice as large as the previous room. And there are even more angels, and they are frantic, and they are packaging up things, and they're busy. He said, what's this department? He said, well, this is the department where all the requests for, this is where all those requests are packaged up. So this is where we package everything up and we get ready to dispatch it back down to earth. All those miracles for healings and for help and for support. Wow, he said, it's really busy. Oh, yeah, you think we need a pair of hands in that first room? We always need an extra pair in this room. We can't keep up. We have prayers being answered and requests for signs being answered by the minute. They walk down this long, long, long corridor, and they finally come to a third room, but this time it's a very small room. It's like the size of, say, a small storeroom. And the man is quite shocked because he comes to find there's only one angel in there, idle, not doing anything at all. And he says to his guide, if the other two rooms are so busy, what's he doing? And his angel turned to him with sadness in his eyes, and he said, well, this is the department of acknowledgement, gratitude, and thanks, and very little or very few ever come back. So the biggest tip I can give to anybody that's wanting to invite the spirit world into their lives is to ask for a sign. Then let it go and trust that when the timing is right for both worlds, the sign will appear. And when it does, acknowledge it and say thank you. Because the more you acknowledge when spirit turns up in your life, the stronger your connection to them will build. It's like building a bridge.
Wow.
And the more profound those signs will become, and you will stop from going from just getting the sense of a loved one there to having the penny from heaven or the butterfly, or perhaps you'll feel their touch on your shoulder. Perhaps you might even have an apparition and you might actually see them. But you've got to start to acknowledge the little aspects in your life when you can see the spirit world is reaching out to you. Acknowledge that, give them reassurance as well, and be home for the spirit world. And you will find that pretty soon you'll have amazing, amazing connections happening in your own life, and you'll have no need for a medium because you can have total awareness yourself. You can learn to be aware when the spirit world is reaching out to you. And when the spirit world touches your life like the wind, we see the effects of that, don't we?
That makes me think of a moment that I had. It was actually in our previous home, but I was, I had been podcasting already, and I was working on a blog post about spirit communication and EVP. And I was, on a deadline, and I was, cramming, trying to finish it and post it. And I'm sitting here typing words having to do with spirit communication tools and all kinds of things. And I hear a click, and I turn around behind me, and the cabinet where I keep, a lot of the toys and the spirit communication tools and those things, it just like click, and I look over and I see the door swing open, and I look at it and then I think, wow. And I remember going, well, that is really cool. Thank you. And then I just kept going. And then like a day or so later, I was like, you were so sucked into your deadline and the get it typed out. And I'm like, what an idiot. That was a like, break out the tools. Why didn't I stop right there? And, I'm not a medium, so I would require the tools to communicate. So
even just saying hello,
Right. So maybe I probably just shot myself in the foot. I probably would have had more communication that night if I would have done a better job of acknowledging it.
And that's so important, because it takes a tremendous amount of energy for the spirit world to reach out to us. And I've often said to a lot of my audience, just imagine that you're in the spirit world and you're trying to get a message back across to a loved one. So you think to yourself, all right, I will come to them in a dream. But your loved one wakes and passes it off as just a dream. And you think, okay, well then when I visit, I will play with the dog, so that way the dog will bark excitedly. Maybe that will get their attention. And they go, what's the dog barking at? Okay, I'll make the lights flicker. Maybe there's an electrical storm. So we are very quick sometimes to dismiss things. I'm not saying accept everything straight away, but be very open and very aware. And I feel that, yeah, you're correct. You probably could have had some incredible experiences there if you had taken the time to invite them in for a cup of tea.
So I'll never forget the potential that I could have had that evening.
Exactly.
So annoying. So we have had so many questions, and I know you've seen them in the Big Seance parlor today.
I have. And thank you to everyone that, has taken the time to ask a question. That's that's wonderful.
It's the most questions I've ever received when I've put in one of those requests, so that's cool. I do have to say, though, that we're going to probably stick with some of the more general questions, because it would be, especially, we're kind of, there's so many nerdy things that we've already talked about, and so we don't have time for a lot of them. But there are a few that I know are going to be really good, and even before we started talking tonight, Mitchell and I talked about a few of these that kind of stood out. And so there are a few. Our paranerd friend Diana, she's from Australia. She's from Sydney, I believe. Are there spiritual locations in Australia, like locations in nature or certain buildings, that are highly active / charged / vibey? I love that she said vibey.
Well, hi, Diana, and thank you so very much for your question. And yes, absolutely, there are many locations in Australia and also all over the world, as I'm sure you're aware, where there is a lot of energy from both the spirit world, but also there can be psychic energy. So, if a traumatic event has taken place in a certain location, there can be what I call an energy ghost, if you will. It's like the remnants of psychic of energy that's also left in that space. As well as we can have the spirit world that chooses to linger and frequent around certain places and for all kinds of reasons. And, two places that come to mind that I've had the good fortune of being able to visit in Sydney in particular, is the Manly Quarantine Station, which of course is on Sydney Harbour there. And it's where a lot of people, when they were coming into the country, were very sick and they had to be quarantined. And of course, a lot of people passed away there. They'd have to wash in acidic showers, and it was not the greatest place to really spend a lot of time. And I remember I was there with a friend of mine, and we were on a little bit of a night adventure. And, I had one of those EMF K2 meters, which for those that are, new to that, as Patrick, you'll explain, it's where it picks up on the electromagnetic fields of energy.
Mm-hmm.
And we were standing there up near the doctor's cottage, and the lights on this meter would light from green, it would be green, and then it would go up 1, 2, 3, 4, right up to the color red, and then back down again, and then all the way back up, and then back down. And so 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 3, 2, 1. And it is those, and I had the distinct impression that there was a man in the spirit world who was pacing up and down, the doctor's cottage. And when our tour guide finally caught up to us, he said, "Oh, there's often the doctor here, and he's often very agitated, and he paces up and down." And I smiled. Firstly, I was happy that my K2 meter actually worked. but more than that, he said, and once he's had enough, he starts to throw stones. And there were little stones that started to, people were seeing stones being thrown. So, the quarantine station is a place. And also another venue I went to was it's called Maitland Jail. And to frame it, Maitland Jail is in a more country area. It's not far from where I live, but it's not in Sydney. So it's quite far from Sydney. It was one of the most notorious prisons during its time. They had hangings there, they had executions there. You can still see the bullet marks in the wall from where all that sort of stuff happened. It's a very heavy place to visit. I try not to visit it, to be quite honest, because as a sensitive, I find the energy sometimes quite overwhelming. Mm-hmm. But when I was there with a film crew who had the brilliant idea, or the bright idea, as I say it in jest now, to go there on a blood full moon. There's always going to be a full moon with these things, right? So we're there, and I'm with a group of people, and they had a night vision camera on me, and I actually felt a hand. Was wearing a scarf. It was winter. It was quite cold. I could literally feel a hand around my neck, and I was literally felt that I was being strangled. I actually started to gag, couldn't breathe. There's the night vision camera of me just, standing there one moment, next moment almost choking. When I took my scarf off, because the producer said, "Maybe your scarf's on too tight, maybe it's choking you, just get some fresh air." I mean, she was petrified. She'd never seen that kind of reaction from me in all the years we'd worked together. They got the camera right onto it. There was a full-on red hand mark where I was feeling that I was being choked and strangled. I mean, and this jail was so notorious. It was the kind of place where inmates would sharpen their toothbrushes in the shower block and stab you in the kidney. I mean, it was not a friendly place to be. And again, I felt those pains. So there are many places around Australia that have you could say a concentration, or perhaps have a focus. They're like a spot or a pocket, if you will, where perhaps there is more activity than usual. And I really feel this often occurs when there's been a lot of sadness or tragedy or traumatic events there. The biggest thing is learning to differentiate between, is it a psychic imprint? So is it the history? Is it the remnants of the psychic energy, like an energy imprint there? Or is it a genuine, true haunting? But they do exist, as we all know. And there are two places that I would say are authentically, genuinely have spiritual activity. They are haunted. For anyone that's, fascinated or interested, they're two places, if you local to those places, to definitely visit.
Is that jail the place where in the video the door got locked from the inside and you were like, nope, I'm out. I can't do this. I can't go back in. Is that, that, or am I thinking of a different place?
Oh, do you know, so long ago, I think it is actually. Yes, it was. No, it was Maitland Jail. And I got very, very sick after doing that. Very sick. I mean, it was the one time I was there with Susan, actually. And she heard very clearly in her ear, but I heard too, a man's voice go, ha, 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 in our ear. And she looked at me, I looked at her, she said, did you hear that? I went, I sure did. We rejoined our group. But, yes, to answer the question, sorry, it's a very long-winded answer. I've kind of gone around on a strange tangent, but yes, there are certainly places in Australia and of course all over the world where there is true haunting, there is true activity.
Amy has asked, I'm hearing different perspectives on psychic protection, and you have a section in your book, I think, called Psychic Tools, where you talk about psychic tools. So I thought this was good. She's talking about the psychic protection needed when engaging with spirit. And I guess she's saying the different perspectives she's heard are that it's needed, absolutely. And then she's also heard that it's not needed if you're engaging at a higher vibration. And then the third is other, I guess, is what she's saying. She says, please share your perspective on this.
Well, my perspective is that, first of all, great question. Love that question. And everybody has, of course, their own thoughts on how energy works and about protection, as the question points out. But the thing is in my perspective, protection is very important. And I liken it to, we wear sunscreen before we go out in the sun because we know that if we don't, we're going to damage our skin and it's dangerous. If we're going to walk out into a storm, we use an umbrella. We lock our doors to our house. We lock our cars. We put our money in the bank or in safes. Why? To protect all those physical aspects of our lives. And we've got to realize that we're more than just a physical. We also are a spiritual. And in fact, I love, there's that famous quote by the French philosopher Pierre, we're not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. And when you recognize that you are a soul and you are a spirit first and foremost, and that you're an extension, your body is just an extension of, on the physical level, of your soul, it's important to protect yourself, whether or not you're doing spiritual work, whether or not you're engaging with the spirit world. Now, I've heard some people say, well, if you live in fear, you attract to you what you fear. So if you believe that you're safe and you're protected, you've got nothing to fear, then you won't need protection because you're not going to attract those lower energies to yourself. But in my experience, that's not so. Protection is so important. And one of the tools that I teach all of my students, and one of the tools that I use regularly, is placing a gold light around myself. I actually visualize the color gold. I find gold is a very powerful color. It's the color that I like to work with for protection. And I literally will surround myself in a golden light. I use prayer as a form of protection. And you've got to remember that, forget about, protecting yourself when you're connecting to the spirit world, just with people in your daily life, because of course, those in our daily life are spirit. We are spirit. We are souls, here in a physical body. It's no different whether they're in the spirit world or they're here this side of life. You've got to protect yourself. And I think everybody can identify with being in the line at perhaps the bank or perhaps the supermarket or even a post office, and somebody stands behind you and you go, oh, I can feel that person in my aura. I can feel that person in my space. Or we have that friend that, calls us and tells us about their relationship breakdown. And by the end of the call, you're so drained.
Yes,
every time
energy vampire. Yeah.
Right? So protecting your aura, protecting your energy is so important. And using the gold light is perhaps one of the most powerful ways we can do this. So you literally visualize the gold light around your entire body. I always say to people, to my students, think of Glenda the Good Witch from The Wizard of Oz, who's in her bubble, but make it a gold bubble. And make sure the bubble goes over the top of your head and under the soles of your feet. And the next thing you can do, of course, is place mirrors around you. Visualize,
I've done that.
Right? With the reflective side facing outward. And then the next thing to do, which most people forget to do, is you actually place a ring of fire all the way around yourself. And what this does, because fire, the violet flame, so that's talking about now a Saint Germain and the violet flame. So fire, of course, it transmutes, it actually, any negative energy. So I actually will often place, and quite frankly, I just like to backtrack here. The order that I do this is I place the gold light around myself, then I place a ring of fire. Then I place the mirrors with the reflective side facing outward. And that is my form of protection. That is how I protect my energy.
That is seriously like triple protection right there.
Yeah. And I actually say the words, I am safe. I am protected. My energy is safe. I am protected. And once I feel that sense of calm and protection, I then say, I lock it in. I lock this energy right now into my auric field. I lock it in. And I go about my day. And there are many times that all of us will go about our day and we'll come up against a difficult situation or perhaps an argumentative situation with, a coworker in the office, or there's a real, hot, heavy type meeting. Another thing you can do, of course, is fold your arms over your abdomen and slightly turn your shoulders or your back. So that way you're protecting your solar plexus, which is the solar plexus chakra, which is in your stomach region. And quite often when we're experiencing negativity or negative energy, the first place we feel it is in our stomach. We feel that, we feel sick, we feel drained, we feel all those different emotions that come with, negative energy. So protecting your energy field is very important.
Or you could just, flat out say, don't mess with me, I'll burn you with my fire circle.
I wouldn't tempt some of them, let me tell you. So, but it's so protection. I feel it's important. I have come across other teachers and I don't disparage anyone else's beliefs or thoughts around protection. Some people say, well, if you're only working in higher energy, but irrespective of whoever you're working with, it's important to protect yourself. Just as I could say, well, if you're only going out in the sun for 5 minutes, it doesn't really matter. But we know that that's not the truth. So protecting yourself, I find, is very important. And I don't protect myself out of fear. I protect myself out of self-respect and self-care. I protect myself out of care for myself and my own spirit and my own energy. Another little secret, or I shouldn't say secret, but perhaps it is to some because we don't hear about this often, is when I lie in bed at night, the very last thing I do is I place one hand on my stomach, another hand on my heart, and I say to the universe and I say to God or to spirit, please make me a channel for healing. Please channel your healing through my hands into my body. Please allow me to, participate in your healing work, and dear God, I will to thy will. And I ask for healing energy for myself every night. But what I do is I focus on all the places that I've been that day, be it the shops, be it at work, be it at the office, be it in the car, be it at a friend's house, at a concert, whatever, a restaurant. And I call my energy back. Nobody else's energy, just my energy, because we leave fragments of our aura. We leave parts of our energy wherever we've been. And so I'm not taking anyone else's energy. I'm not picking up anyone else's energy. I'm just calling my own energy back.
Shut up. That is fascinating.
Stuff. And what I find is it really helps to strengthen my auric field. It helps me to feel protected, feel complete. I don't go to bed feeling drained because I've called my energy back. And another little thing you can do if you do visualize the gold light is in Hawaii, and there might be listeners who can correct me on this, but I think it's referred to as Pico Pico, which means light of light. So basically, as you breathe in gold light, you breathe out gold light. As you breathe in gold light, you breathe out more gold light. And all you're constantly doing is every time you breathe in and breathe out, you're seeing that white light or the gold light around you expand and become larger and larger and larger and larger. So you program, that the fact that you're breathing, every time you breathe in, you're breathing in gold. Every time you breathe out, you're breathing out more gold light, and it gets stronger and stronger and stronger. Some people will say, oh, I've tried the gold light, or I've tried white light, or I've done this and I've done that, and it still doesn't work. I'm still affected. Then my only thoughts are, with all due respect, and perhaps you're not doing it correctly or you're not using your tools correctly, because they are powerful tools and they absolutely do work when you understand how to use them properly.
calling your energy back. You just like blew my mind on that one. I don't think I've ever heard of anybody talking about that concept.
No, and that's why I say, I mean, it's not really a secret because I'm sure there are people who do it, but it's just something my guide taught me. My guide once said to me, I was lying in bed, Patrick, and I was doing the give me healing, send me healing. I was so drained. And my guide said to me, that's because you've left your energy in several different places. If you call it back to your body, you will feel better very quickly. And I was like, wow. And he said to me, you're not going to pick up anyone else's energy. You're not going to take energy away from anybody that you've given your love or given your energy to. You're only going to call back your energy. And, you know, it really is universal law, isn't it? Your energy, like attracts like. Your energy must always come back to you at some point. But I call it back. I speed the process up. I expedite it. You know, and give it a try. You know, just think about all those conversations you've had, all the places you've been, and slowly bless those places, bless those conversations, and call your energy back. You will be amazed at how transformative that can be for you in your life.
Along the same topic, Sonia asks about protecting pets in your home. Do you do it similarly, or are they similar techniques? Do you picture your home in that bubble? Or do you have different techniques for that?
No, absolutely. Your home, your car. You know, there are things you can do, of course, in your home or in your environment to create a peaceful, clear environment. For instance, you know, I often will smudge my home with white sage, you know, because the sage clears away negative energy. I will have certain crystals that I place. You know, I've even got crystals on my table here as we're doing this interview, you know, around me, which protects my energy. So black tourmaline's a wonderful crystal for protection. So too is tiger eye. Tiger's eye is a very, very wonderful, it's a wonderful stone to carry with you because tiger's eye, just as the eye of the tiger, has a very watchful quality. It's a very protective stone. It's very watchful. So, you know, I work with crystals. You know, there are many, and in my book, Sensing Spirit. In fact, in both my books, Sensing Spirit and Sensing Psychic, which are available on Amazon to all of my friends in America. It is available on Amazon in the States. So, you know, it is available there. You know, I do talk about different tools, like even placing a glass of water in a room where you feel there's negative energy, because the water will actually attract the negative energy and little bubbles often will appear inside the water. You know, I talk about, yes, using the crystals, using bowls of salt. So placing bowls of salt down in certain rooms. There are many, many, many ways that we can create peaceful energy in the home. And another way, of course, is to look at the layout of your home and where you've got your furniture and, you know, the feng shui. So that's the energy of the house and how the energy is flowing. And then, of course, to be really aware of, you know, if you're a person that might, you know, there are some people that, you know, like to collect things. You know, there are people who are pack rats. You know, they hold on to things. They might have a thing where they decide they want to hoard things. You know, look at the energy in your space. You know, I've often found people that are very depressed often not all the time, but sometimes if they're a person that collects and holds onto a lot of possessions, often stores their possessions very low to the ground. And when they lift their possessions up off the ground, the energy in the environment shifts and it starts to bring out that sense of, oh, I can breathe again. So there's many facets. You know, look at the energy of your home because energy flows where your attention goes. So notice what's going on in your house. But yeah, you can put the gold light, of course, around your home, around your car, around your pets even.
We have a question from James, and I thought this was interesting. James says, I have a question. Back a few years ago, while driving home, a white ball of light the size of a basketball appeared a few feet in front of my truck. It was about 1 a.m. It just went real slow from about 12 feet to 1 foot in front of my truck, then disappeared. What happened?
Well, because I wasn't there, James, it's difficult to answer exactly, but I have a vague idea of what I feel has occurred. And what I really feel as I hear Patrick read me your question, James, is that was your guardian angel. I believe that the orb that you've seen is your guardian angel. And why was your guardian angel materializing or showing themselves as a ball of orb or, you know, a white light or a ball of orb the size of a basketball? May have been to get your attention because perhaps you weren't fully aware, or perhaps there was some kind of danger, or perhaps I was there to help you. So I really believe that was your angel touching in and guiding you. And that's what I would put that experience down to. I feel it was your guardian angel. And we all have a guardian angel. Every single one of us. We don't all listen to our angels as we should, but we all have a guardian angel. And I would say that that spirit light is the light of your angel checking up on you, making sure you're going to get home safely.
That's awesome. Mitchell, I wish that people actually could see that we are looking at each other's faces today for this interview. And I don't very often get to see video as I do my interviews, but your energy today and your light and your, just from the moment we connected and your smile on your day off.
I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure and I've enjoyed it. And the energy has been wonderful. And for you to give me the gift of, a reading today that wasn't planned, that's very kind of you. I want to give you the chance to give any final thoughts you have. And, we haven't talked a lot of specifics about the books, but definitely, oh my gosh, check out these books. Amazing. I still have the second one to read, Sensing Psychic, and I can't wait to get to that. But give us your final thoughts and tell us where we can find you and anything else you want to end with today.
Well, I'd just like to thank you. And I'm going to say that, above everything else, my biggest message is that love like life can never die. I always say at the end of all of my events, we don't die. We simply change address when it is time. And I always encourage everybody to talk to their loved ones in the spirit world more often, because they genuinely are only ever a whisper away. And it's so true. And I'd love to connect with everybody. I am on Facebook. You can look me up, Mitchell Coombes, on Facebook. You will see my Facebook page. As you mentioned, my website, thank you very much, mitchellcoombes.com. And my books are available on Amazon worldwide. So, if you're interested in sensing spirit or sensing psychic and learning more about myself, my work, and the many, many, many experiences that I've had with the spirit world and that with my clients as well, then you'll really enjoy Sensing Spirit. And it's been a pleasure and it's been a joy.
And people could definitely search for your name in YouTube too. There's quite a bit on YouTube that they could see, because that's what I've been doing today. And you're hanging out in the Big Seance Parlor on Facebook sometimes too. You're in there. People could say hi on there.
You can see a number of my television appearances. I've been doing the morning show here in Australia for 9 years. I've had a weekly segment, which would be the equivalent to a segment on, say, Good Morning America. Mm-hmm. That would be our equivalent. So it's a national program. It goes Australia-wide. And so that you can see, like, I've got such a large body of work. I have such a large body of work from over the years. So
you rock!
Thank you, and so do you.
For show notes, including links to anything we may have mentioned in this episode, visit bigseance.com. You can find and subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play Music, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and just about anywhere podcasts are found. Do you have any comments or feedback? Go to bigseance.com/feedback to learn how to get your voice in a future show. Or you can call my feedback line, 7755-TELL-ME. That's 775-583-5563. Interested in learning how to promote and share the podcast? Go to bigseance.com/share. Thank you so much for listening. Unfortunately, it's time to blow the candles out, but we'll see you and light them again next time.
Your Paranerd hashtag for today is Sensing Spirit, which is the title of Mitchell's first book. So tag me at Big Seance and Mitchell at Mitchell Coombes, and Mitchell is Mitchell. Coombes is Coombes. and use the hashtag #SensingSpirit. You rock.